Hi, and welcome to Blueprints to Buildings. I'm your host, Glen Palmer, and on this show, we interview the movers and shakers in the world of property and real estate. Now, before I dive in, a very quick word. This show is brought to you by a new visual technology that is quietly making waves in the property development industry. Developers using it are cutting design costs, accelerating off plan sales in ways that sound almost too good to be true. If you are curious, message me directly on Glen Palmer Secure at LinkedIn or check out the show notes below. Now, today's guest, I'm joined by David Shaw. Now, he's a chartered quantity surveyor and director at Torridon, specializing in retrofit and refurbishment. Now, he helps clients gain clarity, certainty, and confidence from day one. David, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Really appreciated. Know you're busy. Let's just dive right in, shall we?
Yeah, no problem.
Excellent. So, if time travel became a reality and you had a chance to go back in time to when you first started your career, what would the person that you are now tell your younger self?
This is a difficult one for me because I always kind of think about like hindsight's a wonderful thing, but actually
It
you learn
certainly is.
something from everything that you do.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'd necessarily want to go back in time, and because there's too many variables and things you can change. But I think one of the things that I used to get a lot of when I was very early in my career, in particular, is I used to kind of get, I guess, the whole being busy confused with being like valuable and being resourceful. I still do work a lot of hours, but that's because I have my own business and it tends to not be busy work. It tends to be more productive work and things that are actually getting things done. But I think early on in the career, it was more around like actually I've got lots of things. I need to make sure I say yes to everything, take on all these projects and things. So yeah, it was that's probably one of them. And then I think just on kind of reflection as well, having especially when you're early in your career, and the quantity surveyors are quite naturally introverted. So I don't think I know many quantity surveyors that are like more extroverted in nature. But we have I guess we deliver a lot of difficult to deliver news and have
Yeah.
a lot of difficult conversations with people. And actually, one of the things that we're all very good at as a profession is suppressing that and not actually having those conversations. Even to this day, I'd say there's still a tendency to kind of kick the can down the road a little bit. But I think
Yeah.
uh, it would be like when earlier on in my career, have those difficult conversations earlier. Don't let them bottle up and kind of manifest in your head, because I think that's probably one of the kind of things that causes you so much stress and pain. And then you have the conversation, and it's actually maybe
Not that bad.
challenging, but it wasn't as bad as you thought and built it up in your head anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I do that all the time. I go over conversations in my head, how it's going to go. We as humans, we always go to the really dark side, the really negative side.
Yeah.
And it's getting out of that comfort zone and just saying, it's got to be tackled, it's got to be done. And
Yeah.
then, most of the time, it's not as bad as we always think.
Yeah, do you know, I
Yeah.
can't remember where it was that I read it or picked it up, or maybe it was somebody who said it. But it's what's the absolute worst thing that could happen? I'm sure it's from a book, quite a famous book, actually. I just can't pin down where I got it from, but it's what's the absolute worst thing that could happen? And then you actually realize, well, you're not going to lose your job, you're not going to die, so you're all going to be fine. So what's the
Yeah.
actual worst thing that could happen by having that conversation is someone gets a wee bit upset, or they're not happy with how much you're willing to pay them for that variation. So it's quite an interesting kind of concept, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And David, you talk a lot about clarity and confidence very early on. So, where do projects most commonly go wrong? And when that clarity isn't established at the outset, what are the repercussions of that?
So clarity, certainty, and confidence. I think you actually said all three of them at the beginning. Those are we kind of have it's the Torridon difference. It's the fundamental things that we aim to give our clients, because we think that they're lacking those from other people in the market. So I'll kind of just preface with that. Clarity is probably one of the ones that I'm obsessed with. I'm obsessed with giving our clients clarity, making sure that they're really clear on everything. I think where projects go wrong is normally it's a bit of it, like it's lack of alignment. So what you normally find is you'll have a budget. It may or may not have been formed before the brief even was. If it was probably plucked out of thin air, or some sort of benchmark range that's been derived off some internet source or from speaking to an agent who is not necessarily a cost expert, or say an agent or an architect who's not necessarily a cost expert, but knows a little bit about projects. So they've maybe plucked it out of there. It was probably heavily caveated when it was given to the client or whoever is setting that budget, and it's never been properly developed out. And then in tandem with that, the brief it may be developed, but isn't developed in line with that budget. So we have, and I think being clear and having that kind of clarity is like, I know that this is what I want, and then I've consulted professionals and they've told me that this is how much it will cost. And these are the things that I know are the risks. So I need to then make sure that I have budgeted appropriately, or I have worked out how I'm going to mitigate and reduce that risk. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong. We have these things called 5 principles of cost certainty. And if you want to have certainty on your project, you need to have achieved all 5.
Yeah.
And actually, robust budget and understanding your project ambition are the 2 most important principles, and they're the ones that need to be dealt with right at the start. You can't kick the can down the road, and you can't just go and chuck a £100 a square foot or something against an office bit out and just assume it'll be okay.
Yeah. And then following on from that, so when clients actually approach you, where are they coming from? Are they referrals? Are they repeat business? Are they consultants, developers? And what do you think makes them choose your company, Torridon, over any other QS practice? What's your sort of USP?
Sorry, I was trying to pick my moment to cough there. Basically, our work. So we're predominantly in the commercial sector. So that's my area of specialism, and retrofit, refurbishment, and fit out. So it tends to be all office-led projects, also office to hotel, office to other use, those types of things. Yeah. Most of our work comes from referrals and introductions from architects, project managers, other consultants that we work with. We are, and on purpose, we are a cost consultant only business. So we don't, unlike many other QS firms, we don't offer project management or building surveying or any other complementary services. So we are purely focused on the cost. And I think it's partly one of our USPs, but the real USP is the way we actually deliver our service. It's a very hands-on, senior professional role, and so it's director-led service, unlike potentially some of the larger companies who will have maybe more graduate delivered, but director turns up to meetings and things. Our service is very much the director is leading the project and actually delivering it, supported by a wider team, but they're the front and center. And that's one of the kind of real differentiators for us. We're also, as I said, we're a cost consultant only business. So we can offer that impartial cost advice, not getting distracted by other priorities and things. So our advice is to you as the client, we're your trusted advisor in terms of all matters cost and procurement. And we'll leave the other experts to deal with their areas, and we won't be trying to cross-sell you all those services. And then, as well as that, it's the way we approach our projects in terms of what I mentioned earlier about the clarity, certainty, confidence. We have a kind of unique approach that a lot of our clients like, and it's all about helping to identify those risks early and things, and not just sitting on the sidelines and waiting for a problem to actually occur later on.
Yeah. And with so much focus now on net zero. What do clients consistently underestimate about the cost, complexity, and sequencing of retrofit and refurbishment projects?
Well, starting with the cost, everyone thinks it's going to be cheaper than it is. So we'll start there.
Always.
But I think retrofit to get to net zero is, I think, a little bit misunderstood to begin with. So everybody assumes that they just need to do this massive project where they're gutting the building and they're changing it all to all electric and they're changing absolutely everything. Now, yes, that is the ultimate and probably the way that you'll get most buildings to net zero. But people kind of forget about the in-between steps.
Mhm.
They forget that like the decarbonization decisions and all these sort of decisions need to be made really early, because it's not. Otherwise, what happens is you end up with various different components and different systems in a building that don't all work and configure and talk to each other. But actually, there's things that everybody can do to their buildings right away that have very little cost. Just like
Mhm.
getting controls right, even educating people properly to make sure lights are turned off, make sure heating is turned off, and things. I think a lot of people just kind of skip straight beyond that to the flashy
Yeah.
projects. And now it's great if they do, because as a QS, I don't get much work out of people turning off lights and things. But there's steps that people can make in between, and I think that all gets missed. But then what also happens is people can't afford to. So say you've got a building and you think you're going to have to invest £10 million, say, to get it to net zero, and you go, I don't have £10 million now, so I'm going to spend that over the next 10 years, £1 million per year, obviously with inflation and all that in between as well. But I'll
Yeah.
spend £1 million a year. And then they go away and they start on it in year one, and they say they maybe put some PVs on the roof or something. Year two, they maybe change all the lights to LED. Year three, they maybe insulate parts of it. But they're not thinking about it joined up. So the
Mhm.
sequencing and the way you do it is everything. For example, if you're going to switch to an air source heat pump or an other electric heating system, then it needs to be considered in the bigger picture. So what's the actual capacity requirements? And a lot of
Yeah.
people just kind of jump into going and changing the bit of M&E kit straight away, but without thinking about what other work they're going to do in the building.
Yeah.
And then when you do that other work, sometimes that reduces the load, which means you've technically got an oversized bit of kit. So proper modeling needs to happen
Yeah.
to enable those decisions to be made. But I think when people do plan retrofit projects, they kind of just jump in and they just start doing bits and pieces without thinking about the overall bigger strategy, what
Yeah.
that overall £10 million looks like, rather than what just the next couple of £1 million each year is.
Yeah.
When it's an existing building as well, everybody underestimates the level of disruption. We're decarbonizing a building for a client at the moment, and they're moving everybody out because they understand that. But when they first engaged us, they weren't aware that the level of disruption that this was actually going to cause, and the amount of time it was going to take. Because obviously, the more phases you have, the more work you try and squeeze into a live building with people in it, the more disruption there's going to be, which means the more phasing and the more cost. So and even time as well, because it'll take a bit longer. So yeah, I think that there's probably those are probably the kind of main things that are underestimated. There's a lot of misunderstanding, I guess, around getting to net zero, and I think every client's obviously different. Everyone's got different levels of education around it, which is where the kind of you have to make sure you understand what your client knows at the beginning as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and that leads me quite nicely onto the next question, because you, as you say, you're quite an advocate of practical, phased approach to that decarbonization. So what does just elaborate? What does good look like when clients are balancing those budgets, the different disruptions, and the long-term asset value?
So yeah, those are probably all quite distinct points. So to kind of address, I think what good looks like is having that clear strategy from the beginning, not, as I said earlier, not jumping straight in and just doing the year one works, not just putting the PVs on the roof, because they might not even pay back. But a lot of clients will just they just kind of will will say that they want something. Usually it's the thing that's visible as well, so that people can see it. And I think a lot of people just kind of dive in. So number one is get the strategy sorted out. Work out what the things you're going to do this year, 2 years' time, 3 years' time, 10 years' time. So you know what your plan of attack is, how you're going to actually approach it. And then also tackling those interventions in a logical order. So like I said, not just going for the one that is easiest to do now, because actually it might be the easiest thing to do to change the boiler over, but actually you might end up under or oversizing it if you do it now without actually working out what you're going to be doing in future. And also when it comes to a logical order, sometimes, especially if it's say a tenanted building and there's multiple tenants, there might be clear things that you can do when a floor becomes vacant. So you might be able to do lots of kind of medium type of interventions, one per year, say for the next few years. And then you might have a major point where the building becomes almost vacant, and that's the opportunity to do the major interventions, the things that, if you're going to do things to the facade or the windows, things that are really disruptive and are difficult to do with an occupied building. Because what you want to be doing in terms of cost reduction, and even carbon as well, is minimizing abortive work. Any abortive work obviously has a cost and a carbon impact, well, embodied carbon, that is. And we should always be mindful of abortive work and things that are done as a temporary measure, because that always has a premium associated with it, both in cost and carbon terms.
Yeah. And, QS work often involves helping teams visualize trade-offs before decisions are actually locked in. So how valuable do you think like 3D tools like digital models could be seen in helping clients not only see the cost and scope and retrofit options, but see more clearly earlier on in the process?
Yeah, I think this is probably, we've been talking about like proper BIM models with integrated cost for, I think, since I was a graduate. This is the sort of thing that's been talked about for a long, long time. And I think actually not many people have made much kind of progress with them in terms of integrating cost in, so that you can drag and drop and move things around and suddenly the cost recomputes. That's very, very, I think that's still a wee bit away. And I'm not entirely sure what the reluctance is. I think it's probably more the challenges of integrating that sort of data. But I think that would be really valuable, because the modeling, especially when it comes to retrofit, the modeling is really important to help understand, are you going to do work to the facade, or are you going to do work to the M&E? And it might help with that sequencing piece that I was talking about. So you could have a model that says, this is what the building's going to look like after year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, which helps the owner or landlord or whoever it is that's got the interest in the building to know what its life cycle carbon footprint of the building is going to be in each of those years. Because you can use that modeling. Having cost attached to that would obviously be ideal, because it means that you can work out what the cost of operating or what the cost of actually doing that work is as well.
Yeah. And for the next generation of QSs coming through, what skills really matter most? Is it the technical ability? Is it commercial judgment? Or is it the ability to bring multiple stakeholders together around a shared understanding? So in your view, what would that look like?
So I think there's a baseline level of technical skills that you need. I speak to fourth year students at a university in Edinburgh every year and kind of talk about this. One of the things, like you have to have that baseline technical knowledge, but it's not the most important thing that they need to be developing. They'll get that from university. They'll get that from reading textbook or searching online. I think the most important thing for for any generation really is the attitude. So the attitude of the person is really what drives what they're able to achieve in their career. And I think I've always noticed that when I used to work at a bigger company before, and whenever we'd recruit graduates and things, it was always when I was interviewing, it was always the attitude I was looking for. So I think that's really important. Having a good commercial head. So as a QS, you need to have a good commercial head. And that's not necessarily something that's taught. It's probably something that you either have or you don't, and you can maybe make it slightly, you can maybe improve it slightly, but it's probably something that you've either got or you don't.
Yeah.
And then I think a lot of, coming back to clarity, quantity surveyors are terrible. In fact, probably our whole industry is terrible for jargon. We use all sorts of terms and acronyms, and I'm guilty of it as well. I try and avoid it as much as I possibly can. But when I'm communicating with a client, especially clients who maybe don't develop as much, and are maybe, they might not be one-off clients, they might be experienced construction clients, but they're not seasoned developers who come from a QS or a PM background. And I think is trying to avoid the jargon, but also communicating complex things and ideas in a simple way. Everybody thinks, oh, you need to sound smarter, but I actually think you almost want to not sound dumber, but you want to make your idea, like, you want to communicate things in a really simple way so that people can really understand what they're listening to and what they're hearing and seeing in terms of the cost. Because if my client doesn't understand why I've made an assumption because I've used some technical term that they don't quite comprehend, then something might come back to bite later on, and then it'll just be, oh, I didn't realize that. That's why it's always really important to make sure anything that's a bit complicated, to try and actually simplify it in a way that people can understand. So I think that's a really good skill you do learn that skill. And people coming out of schools and universities are probably not taught it really as much as they could be. Because I think I think it's probably one of the most important things, actually, and I should have started with that. But yeah.
You got there in the end though, David.
Yes.
Amazing. Well, David, really loved having you on the show. Really enjoyed the conversation. And it always intrigues me that cost is often sort of skipped now and again when they're thinking about the overall picture. So it's really good to have a conversation on the QS side of things. So once again, thanks to my listeners and the viewers of YouTube as well. David, just before we sign off, if listeners or viewers want to get in contact with you, learn about what you're actually doing at Torridon, what are the best ways for my listeners and viewers to do that?
Probably LinkedIn, but my email address is david@torridon, which is torridon.co.uk. And I'm happy to have any email contact as well. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, that's it for today. And remember, this show is supported by a new tech tool that's redefining what visualization even means in property. The ones using it now are already pulling ahead. You've been listening to the Blueprints to Building podcast. I'm your host, Glen Palmer, and I was joined today by David Jaw. Thanks again for listening. See you on the next episode.